Hey guys, this is David Castellani. Thanks for stopping by my studio. Obviously, hardware is a big focus for me. A few years back, I just kind of started falling into the cycle of, getting gear, finding stuff that was a little bit cheaper secondhand, and then I just kind of played with it for a while, and if I didn't like it, I would end up, moving it along. And through that process, I really started falling in love with all the different quirks that all the different pieces may have. What I've really learned is that each synth kind of has its own character. It has certain things that it's really, really good at doing. Obviously, there's some things that it's really bad at doing too, but I really enjoy kind of learning the intimate ways that the synthesizers work and kind of laying into them in that process. Through years of doing that, I've really just kind of fallen in love with them. And when I find something that is really special to me and is something that I really care about, I'll end up holding on to it. And maybe, it only makes it into my tracks, maybe once a year or something like that. But if it's still got that special place in my heart, I'll hold on to it. Obviously, you don't need, all the stuff when you're making music, and you can very well just make amazing music just, with a computer or even an iPad these days, or even an iPhone, I guess. That's not why I have them. I have them more because I have just a very intimate and rewarding relationship with using them. I really feel that there's kind of two different types of artists, and I think that mainly artists just kind of follow their heart. They have inside of them what direction they want to go, what vibes and feels they want to go, and they kind of stick to that. And I think some of the best artists are really people that are like that. For me, that was kind of how it was for quite a while, but then through kind of getting really into this hardware and learning about it and just kind of diving deep into all the gear, I started realizing that actually if I shifted my process into more of a discovery type method, I really enriched the way that the music sounded in the end. So now I actually kind of really depend on exploration. I turn everything on, I start turning knobs and, twisting everything that I can, pressing buttons, starting sequences. And from there, I just kind of discover and I explore and I try to see what I can find. Now it's become the main way that I make music because it's so fun this way. You never really know where you're gonna end up. You never know, what is gonna happen next. You just know that if you kind of keep leaning into the instruments, something magical is gonna happen. The way that my studio setup is wired right now is that I have pretty much every synth that you see in here is plugged into a patch bay. And then from the patch bay, that runs 32 channels out into my mixing console, which is an APB Dynasonic desk. It's a really, really beautiful desk. It's probably one of the most beautiful things that I've managed to gather in this studio. It's just a great analog mixing board with really great EQs and preamps, and it's really, really just nice how it adds a little bit of more character, grit, and some beef to each of the sounds. And then from there, I have the individual outs routed into my sound card, and when I record, I just track 32 channels straightforward, and that's pretty much it. Over the last couple of years, I've really started focusing on modular synthesizers. As you can see, it's really changed the way that I make music and the way that I appreciate music, and also the way that I feel when I'm making music. I actually started off by getting a make noise shared system, and when I first got it, it just kind of sat there. I tried to mess with it, and I was really just kind of getting some like bleepy sounds, nothing that was really that great. It was a little overwhelming at first, even though I already knew a lot about synthesizers and synthesis. From then, just one night, I was like, that's enough. I really got to get into this. So I spent about 12 hours just, burying myself into YouTube and trying to really learn all the specifics about CV and kind of signal flow that I hadn't yet understood properly. And from there, honestly, from one day to the other, a whole new world opened up. It really just kind of changed completely the way that I approach making music. Mainly because when you're using these synthesizers, it's very different from when you're, in front of a computer, obviously in front of a screen, or even if you just have one synth and you're kind of working with a DAW, stuff like that. What happens here is, you remove the screen, and it's much more like an acoustic instrument where you're really just using your ears and, using your brain and just the tactile functions of turning knobs and really just kind of seeing and reacting, has turned it into a much more beneficial experience for me. Another really great thing that I really love about it is that I always use the analogy that it's similar to kind of like riding a horse, It's like when you're riding a horse, you are in control of the horse, somewhat. You obviously, you're telling it where to go and you're kind of guiding it. But that horse is also its own animal, and it has its own brain and its own intention, and you really do have to work together to kind of get to where you want to be. And sometimes, you end up in places that you don't expect, or things happen that you don't expect, and you have to kind of hold on and ride it. And it's very much the same thing with modular synths. Every time that I patch something new, I have a direction of where I want to go, but I always know that I'm going to end up and some magical things are going to happen that I didn't really expect to. And that's probably one of the best things about it, and something that I'm always looking forward to when patching. That mixed with the ability to improvise and the ability to really change grooves and have control in ways that you don't expect is just such a beautiful, beautiful thing. When someone builds a synthesizer, if you take like any of the synths that you see or any general hardware synths, you have a big team of people that's focusing on all these different things. They got to come up with the structures of the oscillators, the board, the filters, the envelopes, the key bed. What is the case going to look like? What is the screen going to be like? How are we going to modulate things? There's just so much work that goes into it. When you're working with Modular, you have a couple guys that spend 6 months making a filter, and that's all they're focusing on. So that filter just sounds so great. So when you have that type of dedicated passion and that type of focus on these instruments, and then you're able to mix and match from different creative thoughts and different people that come together to make them, the results are just astonishing. It really is the best thing that's ever happened to me in my music making process. So I fell in love with Eurorack so much and these modular synths that I've actually started a Eurorack company now called Anticulture. We, are just launching our very first product here this year. It's a sequencer, and it's really become a big passion project. And it's really become also just kind of a fruit of wanting to use these instruments so much and falling so in love with them that it just kind of warranted my partner and I to start this company and push it through. So we're very excited to see what happens with it. So when I make a track, now I've kind of fallen into a pretty solid process that I use regularly, which is really just kind of turning everything on. I send MIDI clock from Ableton that goes into a bay that kind of divides the signal and sends it into the rest of the gear. If something doesn't have a sequencer built into it, then it's probably going to run into the Circlon, and then the Circlon will send sequences to that hardware. From there, I just kind of, just press play, and I start manipulating and jamming on everything, with having pretty much 32 channels live in Ableton open, so I can kind of reach for things and turn things on. And from there, I do a lot of tweaking and live kind of moving and changing and just kind of, shaping it the way that like a sculptor would, you just kind of keep molding it and changing it like this, like that. And I really try to get as much movement ahead of time and in the live recordings by, moving the filters and the envelopes and stuff like that. Because I find that when I do it this way, I end up with a recording that already has a lot of feel to it. It has a lot of movement in it already in the recording. And that saves me a bunch of time in having to go back later and do a ton of automation, which can really kind of be the nightmare for me, especially with techno music, there's a lot of subtleties, you know. There's a lot of little baby like movements and changes, and being electronic music and being in a computer, you know, it's really easy to get stale. I think that really putting those subtleties in the movement is really what makes it really great. If I can get that already in a recording, you know, let's say I have a 9-minute jam and I'm you know, really opening, changing the sound, it's so much less work later in the DAW. What that does is it helps me get to the finish line of getting this track finished much sooner, and most importantly, before I get sick of it, because finishing a track is just so complicated. You know, there's so much time that goes into it. Listening for the same beat, you know, for 2-3 days can really just drive you crazy after a while. This has really become one of the strengths in my own personal process, so that I can get to the place that I want to and be happy with it before I get bored with the music. So again, thank you so much. My name's David Castellani. I really appreciate you coming and stopping by and just kind of taking a peek into my process. Hopefully I'll see you around on some dusty dance floor soon. Thanks.